How's it going, everybody? Zach here from Zach's Glass. Just wanted to quickly introduce myself before we get started today. I'm a self-taught glass blower from the northwest corner of British Columbia. I live in Terrace, BC, and I'm a little too far from anybody to get any lessons from the time I started learning. So I got in the shop, I bought myself a torch, and I just started experimenting, watching YouTube videos from Torch Talk and buying Glasscraft webinars back in the day when that was still a thing. I think they've moved over to a different platform now, but I can't remember exactly what it is. I spend a lot of time watching people and trying to imitate and making a lot of mistakes. But lately I've been playing with Electrum, the new color from Molten Aura, and I just wanted to share this Wigwag pendant that I did last week. Somebody tried to buy it off my neck at one of the craft fairs that I was at, and I wanted to keep this one. So I'm going to get in the shop here to do a couple more. I've got a blank of Electrum warming up in the kiln. I'll get some shots of that for you, show you what it looks like. I sleeved it in clear. I did a blowout from a rod, and then I'll be pairing that with a bit of clear and doing some wigwag patterns after I pull it down. So I'm going to share the process and show you some of my work. Hope you guys enjoy.
Okay, now getting started, I've got the first wigwag pendant that I made with Electrum and clear. So I joined two sections of tubing together and then switch axis 90 degrees to make that pattern. So starting out, we've got the blank of Electrum coming out of the kiln. I sleeved this in simax, so that's a brand of clear glass. I predominantly work with simax. I like the way it fumes. So here I am sectioning down a blank so that I can get the amount of glass that I want for the wigwag pattern that I'll be doing. So getting that hot, I put it against the marver and put a little line into it. Sometimes I'll break those apart. I was trying to kind of wiggle it to do that, but I decided to actually melt this into two sections, and then I'll pick a hole open so that I can join the two openings of the tubes together coming up here pretty quick. So if you notice, like it seems like my hands are moving a little quick. I've actually sped up the footage here a little bit. It's at double time just to save a little bit of our, just to save a little bit of time, and so I don't have to ramble for an hour straight to describe the process that I'm going through. But right now I'm just puffing a round bottom into that blank so that I can get ready to open up a hole. So now once I've mostly gotten it rounded out, I do kind of puff into it a few times and give it a little bit of heat so that you can get a nice even wall weight. The more you kind of puff it out and let it condense again with an even rotation, you can achieve a very even wall weight, which helps when you join a couple tubes like this. Everything puffs out evenly as you start to work them into the two blanks into each other. So like you see, I just took a rod and I picked some glass away, and then I puffed a little bit and popped a hole. And then I'm just picking a little bit of excess glass away. Now I've picked up my octagonal reamer. So that's a graphite tool that we use to flare openings. And I'm going to try to make an opening that's even to the size of the hole that I have on the other blank that'll be trying to seal up to it. So I'm just grabbing that out of the kiln now. So I think the hole on the Electrum blank ended up being a little smaller, so I'm going to actually ream that open as well. And it was actually closed a little smaller than I could access with the other reamer, so I got my my pointed reamer. That thing starts at like 2 millimeters, I believe. So yeah, putting that in there, opening up the hole, switching to the larger reamer because it's easier to make a nice circular hole with the bigger surface once you're at that size. I'm just pressing it against the marver there a little bit just to flatten the ring so that I have two even rings to put together there. So this is now like one of the more critical moves throughout the whole process. I joined the two rings together to do a nice ring seal here, and I, like I said, flare them to an even size so that I can actually puff this out and have a very even amount of glass on each side. So there's no wiggling and waving of the joint where the two glasses meet, so that there's like a nice stark, straight, crisp line once you start to make the tubing and to twist up the pattern. So I'm going to switch back and forth from the big flame on my torch to the small one to like kind of make sure I can condense glass up to that ring seal that I'll be puffing out. So there I go, puffing it again. And you'll notice I put some heat into the glass and I wait. I kind of like bring it out of the heat and pause for a little bit and keep turning the glass just to allow heat to homogenize in the tubing so that you can, allow the glass to puff out evenly, because the hottest parts will thin the fastest. So you kind of wait so the glass becomes a little bit more of an even temperature. You'll notice I'm kind of like puffing outside of the frame of the camera there. This being my first tutorial, I'm kind of experimenting with a few different camera angles, you'll notice going forward. Yeah, so now I'm moving on to sectioning down the Electrum so that I have a more even amount of glass on that side of the blank that I'm preparing. I'm flame cutting it apart. I just picked a little plug out of there. I had a bit of like poster tack, like blue gummy stuff, stuck to the end of the blow tube, and that was allowing me to puff while I had a blow tube on each side and still maintain air pressure. So now I'm just going to put a whole bunch of heat into the blank so that I can start puffing it out and rounding it out and evening the walls on the two sides. And the reason I want the two sides to be relatively even is because as I switch axis and pop the hole at the side, I'll be trying to pull it down into tubing again. So the more even they are, the more of a even tube I'll end up with at the end of the process. So just trying to round out that end so I don't have a wavy section of glass where that little end condensed back in as I flame cut it away from the other tube. That's always one of those spots where you'll end up with a little bit of extra glass that can end up making a little wave in the wall. So you try to give it an even heat again and puff that out round. That'll save a bit of work once you change axis and condense the tubing again. So now it looks like I'm about to open up that hole for the axis change. So I'll be turning it 90 degrees. I'm popping that hole for a new blow tube right in the middle of the spot where the clear and the color meets. Picking a little bit of glass away there with a rod. That'll help me thin the little spot that I need to open up and make it easy to blow out like I did there, and then clean up any trash glass that collects on the side of the tube when you blow it out. It'll often leave a little bit of boiled glass that you'd be better to pick away just to avoid any stress at the connection point where your blow tube is. Now I'm just opening that up a little bit with the reamer, picking up a prep blow tube. I flared that a little while ago. And I'm just gonna get that pretty hot, but maybe not perfect, and I'll be quick to flame cut that away so I can make sure that connection point doesn't get too cold before I start to put some good heat back into it. If you don't work a blow tube connection point in very well, it
it's prone to cracking, so you need to make sure you get rid of any acute angles around there. But I wanted to get that other handle out of the way real quick. So now, yeah, back to just setting a bunch of heat into that tube, and I'm definitely being careful to make sure some of that glass at the connection point gets a good splash of that heat, just to keep everything nice and hot before I get a handle on the other end. So once again, this is just the process of puffing it out, letting heat kind of homogenize inside the tubing so that I can make sure that the wall thickness as I puff it out at the end turns out relatively evenly. So now I'm going to add that handle to the end of the piece so that I can kind of support it and put heat into that connection point where the blow tube meets the blank that I'm prepping. Because if it's not supported, it'll flop around and end up not being straight and being impossible to pull out straight. So now you can see there's a little bit of a stretch going on. I'm puffing into it a little bit. It's starting to elongate. There's still quite a bit of unevenness to the tube, though. It just takes time working it in and out, putting heat into it, letting it settle after the heat gets built up, and then puffing it out once the heat's relatively even. So you see me dropping it onto the L-marver there for a second. I usually do that to kind of make sure that my handles are still on straight. Because the straighter your handles are, the easier this whole process is. You end up with less unevenness. That bobbing in the flame will always help glass condense more in one place than in another, and one side of the tube will get a little hotter than the other, and then you end up increasing how uneven your walls are. So now you can see I've really started to stretch it out as the heat lets it kind of condense in there. It makes it easier and easier to have a even base of heat that helps you pull this down into a cylinder. Still looking a little wavy, but once you're done, it should look relatively straight. So now that I've decided I like the one end of the tube, I'm going to work the heat down from one end to the other, to the one that's a little bit more uneven, so that I can finish up straightening that out. So it still looks a little uneven there. Like I said, heat it, pause, puff. And at the end of the day, what I'm doing with this, I'm going to end up making this twisted pattern, and I'll be condensing it all into a little disc anyways. So any unevenness in the walls kind of disappears at the end. But straight, even walls does make the process of making the pattern a little easier. So you can see I've removed the handle now. I'm going to pop another hole at that end so I can put a blow tube on that side too, and then I'll be able to section this off into two separate blanks. That'll make the amount of glass there a little bit more manageable for when I start doing the wigwags. You don't need that much, that much glass in your hands when you're trying to make a little piece. You just need what you need for the pattern you're building. I'm sure you could, pull wigwags off the end of this tube and just keep it all in your hands. It's not that big a piece, but little fine movements get a little bit easier when you have a little bit less glass in your hands. So yeah, just once again, reaming it open, pressing it against the marver. So it's looking like I didn't have a blow tube prepped up, but I'm getting one ready real quick. Just grabbed a 10 mil tube that I had sitting on the workbench. Often I use 10 mil tubes for my blow tubes, except when I'm doing some inside out fuming. I'll often switch up to some 16 mil tubes so I can get a little bit more airflow and allow that fume to travel into the tube. But otherwise I prefer the 10 mil handles. Got 9 mil rods for solid handles. That's what I just removed. There we go, sealing that up. Okay, so now that the two blow tubes are on there, I'm heating up the middle so that I can pull them apart. See, they're cutting apart in the flame, and I'll puff into them a little just to stop any little nipple from kind of condensing at the end. It's easy to kind of end up with a weird wall at weight, like with really thin points coming up to a bit of a thick spot when that's kind of that type of flame cut goes on. So here I am kind of like actually fixing that. I'm just heating behind that little end so that I can condense the thinnest part where it got stretched as you cut the two pieces apart. That'll give me something nice to handle up to here so I can stretch this down and start my wigwag pattern. So here we go, warming that up to pull it down to a narrow section. The narrower this kind of like tiny tube that you pull is, the more kind of switchbacks you can pack into a smaller space. And I'm not getting too crazy with it yet, but there's definitely room to put a lot of detail into this kind of pattern. You can do just a handful of twists like I'm about to do, up to a huge number, and get these really cool zigzags, real awesome lightning bolt kind of patterns and stuff. But for now, I'm not doing anything too crazy. Kind of broke my handle away. Wasn't quite sealed up, not a full fuse, so it kind of broke away as I stressed it from kind of twisting and turning and starting to do that first bit of the pattern. So now I'm going to heat up the tube in bands. I'll kind of heat a small section and twist it one way. As you can see, it's kind of making that little wave in the tube. I'll work that out at the end. And then I let that first turn cool, and I'll warm up a little section next to it and turn it in the other direction. And I just repeat this going down the tube so you get that kind of like zigzag wigwag pattern, as they call it. You can see my camera angle kind of sucks. I'm going to be working on kind of improving these. This is a, exercise in experimentation. I've been wanting to make a YouTube channel for a couple years, but I really felt like I should learn to blow glass first. So now that I've kind of figured my thing out and I know what I'm doing, I finally want to build up a YouTube channel and kind of experimenting with different camera angles. I'm going to figure out what the best options are for me, what you guys think is the best. Let me know in the comments if you have any suggestions, I'd love to hear them. And I'd just like to try and improve the documentation of my glass blowing going forward now that I actually feel like I have something to share, because I didn't feel like being a beginner at the start 7 years ago and sharing improper information. There's a lot to understand in glass, and being self-taught is definitely a bit of a hindrance. It took a long time, but I'm definitely getting there these days. So now you can see I finished up kind of putting that wigwag in there, and I'm starting to heat up the whole section. I've got a little bit more of a broad flame, and I'm heating up multiple little twists and turns all at once, going to that bigger Bravo flame and then back to the sharp flame, kind of trying to save gas a bit and getting that even heat and puffing it out. That'll give you that kind of start to reveal that pattern as the tube condenses. So now that I've gotten it opened up a little bit, I removed that handle at the end, and that's going to let me use a little bit more gravity to help that condense. It's really important after you put that twisted pattern in there to also keep your hands and your rotations even as you heat the whole thing up, because you can undo a lot of the pattern work by doing a little bit of twisting in one direction or another. Like I said, camera angles are something I'm going to have to experiment a little bit with. I was puffing into that and making that nice like bulb shape outside of the frame, and I'm definitely going to work on fixing that up in the future. Yeah, so now that that's most of the way condensed, I think I'm adding a handle so I can condense the last couple little bits without it getting too floppy on me. And then I'll be on to popping a hole on the side so we can change axis again. So yeah, you can see me puffing that out a little bit, condensing it, just making sure I have something to making sure I have an even amount of glass, or no like thick waves in the glass as I tear it away. Like that part, the connection, or the closed off end that I'll end up with as I flame cut this away from the tube, not to have too big of an excess of glass. So it's looking pretty even now. Yeah, I'll be tapping that handle away and popping the hole on the side. So I actually end up popping the hole on the clear side of this one, and that ends up giving you the clear on the outside of the pattern when you condense it down to another tube. So I wasn't actually happy with how this one turned out, but I just wanted to experiment with the opposite of the kind of window pattern that I was going for to begin with. So I'm gonna actually switch to a couple other clips from while I was working, not actually completing this piece in full, I believe. My camera ended up filling up. I didn't realize that I ran out of memory, and I didn't get every little clip, which has been a theme making this project, because once I finally did get all the clips I needed, when I put them on my computer was too full, and I had to clean out a bunch of my hard drive to actually have room to do some updates and make this project happen. So it's been a bit of a slow process making this YouTube video, and I'm just, instead of trying to make it perfect, I'm going with done is better than perfect this time, and I'll accept that I missed some steps and had to cobble together the end of it. I'll just be sure to do better next time. So now you can see I got that little ball pulled away from the original tube, and I'll be adding that to another tube, but that's where I kind of ran out of footage apparently, so I'm switching to what I did when I came back to the shop after I managed to clear a bit of stuff off my phone and continue filming. So I've got another chunk of that same blank that we watched me prep in the other video, and we're going to go straight into Wigwag in this one. I think I probably could have pulled this down a little thinner. I might have liked a few more kickbacks in this one, but the wide kind of pattern that ended up coming out of it anyways looks pretty sweet. So, got this sped up a little bit, and we're seeing those kickbacks get in there, heating up a band, twisting one way, heating up a band, twisting the other way. Just repetition. And I think once again we might have ran into missing a part of that clip. So yeah, here's actually a chunk of that first wigwag that I did. So now that I've added it to a clear tube, it's got a little lip wrap Incalmo line in there where I joined that bubble to the tube, and it did turn out pretty sweet. And then here's the second one that you just saw me do the kickbacks into. Already added it to the tube, condensed it. Like I said, I missed a few chunks of the process. I would have liked to have some of the condensing that wigwag pattern into the tube, but when your hard drive's full, sometimes things don't get caught. But now you can see I've handled up to the face of that pattern, and I'm kind of condensing the backside. This is so that I can pop a couple holes on the edge of the piece so that I can turn it into one of those hollow pendants. And then I'll have a smaller connection point to come in on afterwards. See, I tap that handle away, and I'm going to work on the holes for the necklace. Just kind of polishing that little punty mark. I do believe the tube that I connected this pattern to has a little bit of silver fume on the inside, so it'll kind of have a bit of a blue glow to it in the daylight. So here we've got like that kind of sharp flame, little center fire to heat up a little spot to puff out a blister so that I can open up a hole for the necklace. So I'm really careful to pick where I put these holes to try and make sure that the pattern hangs in a specific direction. You can always kind of get a couple different kind of effects from this sort of pattern, whether you hang it upright with the two connection points above and below, or kind of a different vertical pattern. As you can see when I twisted it there, the couple different options. You could have it 90 degrees to the way I've organized it and get a bit of a different effect from how the pattern lays. So now I've pulled a couple points off of those, and I think what I'm going to do here is glob some hot glass over those little points, and it'll let me kind of break away those holes. Sometimes it's easier to pop the holes open, but often there's a little bit of boiled glass that can condense at the edge of a popped hole, and I'd like to avoid that here because I really don't want to have to remove any excess glass that is kind of boiled or in rough shape. So I'm cleaning up those holes a little bit in the torch flame. That'll help the glass at the perimeter condense a little bit. I'll get the reamer in there and open them up. So I've got a nice hole at each side, big enough for the necklace or whatever clasp that might have to pass through those holes. Usually it takes a couple little bits of heat to condense the glass the way you want, and evenly making sure I look from above to see if they're all, the two holes are kind of like meeting the edge of the pattern at a even amount. And then you can see, yeah, I've picked the spots to kind of organize that pattern so the two pinwheels are at the top and bottom. Now once again, quick cold seal up to the face of the pendant. That's going to let me hold it and flame cut it away from the tube. Now I'll just go in on that spot where it was flame cut away and condense that glass into the back of the pendant. I'll pick up my graphite paddle and I'll press it a little bit here. See, those camera angles, I'm going to get better at that. I'd like to try and make sure I can document as much of the process as I can and show you guys exactly what's going on. Yeah, just being pretty gentle because it is on a cold seal. That pendant could readily fall off that handle. It's not a fused bit of glass. It's just temporary thing so you can finish up the piece and not ruin the pattern when you take the handle off. See, I'm gonna just warm up the end of these tweezers and grab it by one of the holes for the necklace, and I'll give it a little tap on a bit of metal down by the base of my torch. Just kind of polish up that punty mark. And there we go. So we've got Electrum opposed with clear, a nice wigwag pattern, still glowing there. It's one of the treats, blowing glass. You get to see all this glowing glass. It always looks so interesting. And that metallic shine from Electrum, it's really cool. Now back in on another one. I wanted to throw this in at the end of the video because it's actually a bit of a different color pattern here. This one I've done the exact same Electrum sleeved in clear, but the middle of the window in the center is done with some tubing from North Star that's a layered tube of Lucy over Ghost. So Lucy is a UV reactive pink glass that's transparent in natural light, and then Ghost has this white to bluish kind of ghostly color that looks a lot like heavy silver fume or something. So there's quite a bit of color prep that goes into making a little piece like this. Yeah, same process as the last one, just kind of flattening the back, making sure it's even, heating up, trying to polish out any marks from the marver. And I think we're looking pretty good. So you can see that kind of ghost color through there. I'll get that off of the handle and give you a better look at it. So unfortunately this wasn't a super complete tutorial, but I'm gonna definitely work on that, make sure I have the space on the hard drive to do these in the future without kind of having to bounce back and forth and catch up on what I've missed. But there it is, Electrum to Lucy over Ghost. And I'm gonna actually shoot a couple clips in the house with the other pieces. Okay, so to tie it up, here's the set of 6 I've done. This one's just the fume with Electrum. This one's Electrum and Lucy over Ghost with a little bit of Galaxy as a lip wrap in between the colors. So there's a really faint sparkly line that you can kind of see on the surface. This one's the same color pattern. And the clear section does have a little bit of silver fume on the inside on these ones. So when they go through the kiln again, you'll probably see a little bit more color come out of them. Here's just the Electrum hanging out in the middle in between the clear. And last we've got the amber purple sleeved over Electrum, which looks awesome. Hope you like it. Thanks for watching, guys. Take it easy.